Here's a great example of the power of knowledge in action. Hi, my name is Remy Boudreau. I'm a licensed painter, color consultant, owner of Expressions Painting, and founder of Expressions Painting University. I'm a big believer in gathering knowledge in any one of our careers, but when it comes to painting, it is especially powerful to gather that knowledge because it is so rare. There are no mandatory schools for painters to go to start a career, and so that leaves a lot of that important knowledge left outside the door, not making its way in that industry. Having said this, long time ago, I've made a big mistake in the industry because of my lack of knowledge, so I went out and I got that knowledge. I searched every book, every expert I could find. I've gathered knowledge, which today gives me great power in my ability to serve my clients and put value in this industry. So here's one example last summer where I got this call from an arena locally here who had this major problem. The previous year, they had painted pretty much the whole arena with this oil paint, as they have been doing for years and years. But somehow, even though they had used the same products, same techniques, same everything, according to them, everything was peeling the year after that. And so when I got called in, me and my friend at Sherwin-Williams, he's one of the managers and certainly one of my dear friends and one of the person that I respect the most in terms of knowledge, we looked at that and we tried to find a solution. And essentially, what we conclude is that for some reason, that layer of oil paint was very, very thin, which was not normal because the way that the paint is supposed to fuse to the underlayer, the substrate, is by having it melt a little bit of the paint film that's currently there, the substrate, and then fuse together. But with that layer of paint that they had put being so thin, it looks like it just didn't get a time for that reaction to take place. So what was the solution? Because keep in mind, this is a large project. There's a thin coat of paint everywhere. And it's not like it's a flat wall that it could just be scraped. It's masonry, like those cinder blocks. So it's very porous, very rough. It would be hell to try to scrape everything or peel everything off and start again. So what we set out to do is we took an oil primer, heavily diluted it, way more than what is supposed to be done, at about 25 to 30% dilution. And what we did is we put that on the peeling paint after we pole sanded it with a really heavy, like 50 grit paper, to just kind of scuff it up and put some scratches in there. What that heavily diluted primer did is it diluted, it kind of melted, so to speak, that layer of paint that was peeling, and it became part of that diluted primer. It took a while to dry because it was diluted so heavily, but in doing so, that peeling layer of paint essentially disappeared and became part of that primer. Now, 2 days later, we went to see if it had fused to a previous layer, but it did not. And the reason is because that primer was not just primer at that point, it was primer and paint. So they were both mixed together, so it made it so that the primer was not able to bond to that surface. So what we then did is we put another layer of non-diluted primer, just a regular high body primer, put that there. That then diluted the first layer of primer that we put, so that together when they fused, the percentage of that paint that was in those two layers of primer was so minimal that it did not prevent the primer from doing its job. And so a couple of days after, we go back in, do the scratch test to make sure it was holding on properly, and it was. And so after that, you could paint simply with any kind of paint. At that point, they opted to change to a more advanced acrylic product, which is much easier to work with, but still durable for the kind of environment that they were in with, right, hockey equipment, like changing rooms. You could imagine that those walls take up a beating. So we went with some high grade, high acrylic, high endurance, the pencil thickness being very hard on it. So it's one of those things where had I not had any sense of knowledge with what paint is, how it dries, how it bonds, I could never have been a part of this solution. But it's one of those things where once you start becoming an expert with regards to products, it's this kind of creative thinking that you can offer your clients that serves them incredibly. Like, this situation was at such a high risk place because for them to find a solution seemed near impossible. But there's also the risk of part of them were blaming the products. And the thing is that it's just one of those things where products are evolving so fast now with such new technologies that even though it was the same product line, there's new formulations that come out every other year, every few other years, and it requires sometimes a new application method, perhaps to be applied with a certain type of role or a certain type of environment, right? So it's one of those things where your knowledge as a painter is very valuable. The more you can have, the more you'll have a place in this industry, and the more you'll be able to help your clients, but also stay relevant. Because as I just said, products are evolving. If you don't know how that change is taking place or how to adapt, it's going to be very hard for you to maintain a career in this industry. But when you do, it's incredibly powerful, incredibly rewarding. And I can tell you, this is one of those projects was certainly not a typical project for us. But once in a while, I like to tackle on one of those projects just to challenge even myself to bring my knowledge to further levels. And that's exactly what that one had done. It was like a chemistry experiment live on a wall. It was absolutely wonderful, and we were very happy to offer that solution to these guys so that now they knew how to resolve it, and then they could paint the rest of the arena, right? So did you get value in this video? I'm certainly hoping you did. If you are interested in gathering some of that knowledge regarding paint, go to Expressions Painting University. There's a free training program, the Interior Repaint Expert Painter, 45 videos, 3 hours worth, free training. I'm sharing that knowledge that I've gathered over the 20 years with you so that you can take it even further. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next